Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of the platform Let's Talk About It. I'm your host, Jasmine Harden, and I'm here to create a space for Black minds, voices, and culture to thrive. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get into this episode. Welcome back to the platform Let's Talk About It. Thank you so much for being here. I don't want this episode to take up too much time, so I'm gonna jump into just giving you an intro to what to expect for the episode. This is actually something new. I'm doing a novel discussion, just because I've been kind of getting back into my love of reading. I put it down for some time. Um, Mainly due to me being in school. It was hard to find reading as an outlet when I felt like I had to do so much of that for work. So now that I've gotten back into it, I kind of wanted to incorporate it into the podcast a little bit. And because it is also the last episode I will be dropping before the end of Black History Month, I don't feel like I really did a lot of Black History Month centered content. So I wanted to at least squeeze something in here. I couldn't let the month end without, you know, promoting something. Which is something I hope to get better at moving forward. I kind of was on the cuff with this um last few episodes. So I do want to say that the novel we will be discussing is by the title How We Can Win, and it is by Kimberly Jones. And some of you may be familiar, may not be familiar. She is a author of young adult novels, born and raised in South Side of Chicago. She went viral in 2020, I want to say, during the protests, some of the protests going on at the time, um, for a off the cuff, impromptu speech she gave that was very convicting. I will read some of it just to maybe jog some of your memory if you remember her. And then we'll get into some of the topics that I've liked thus far. I haven't finished the novel, but it's just been so good. I couldn't keep it from this platform at all, and it's been really insightful for me. So I just wanted to share. Okay, so the excerpt from her speech um, is as follows. Let me explain something about economics in America. It's that we must never forget that economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That is what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything, and then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing the round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, and you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them. And then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time they didn't like the way that you were playing, or you're catching up, or you're doing something to be self sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally, after release, in the onset of that, they allow you to play. And they say, okay, now you catch up. At this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if a person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's a psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I play 400 rounds of Monopoly with you, and I had to play and give you every dime I made, and then for 50 years, every time I played and you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood. How can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why don't you burn down the community? Why did you burn down your neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But that person that fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. The takeaways from that for me were definitely that Black people, like she clearly said, were definitely brought to this country because of economics. And when you think about that in the context of a capitalist country, that means that we were here to be the very backbone of what made America America. And when it was dissolved, slavery was dissolved, it rocked the foundation of what this country was made of, and it created so much division, which is why wars were literally fought over it. But I digress. um, then she also talked about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, Florida, which are very good examples of Black wealth in this country. So if you don't take away anything, definitely go look into those um, historically significant places, not only in American history but Black history as well. And I also wanted to kind of talk about a social contract, just in case somebody doesn't know what a social contract is and what it means. Because she did mention that towards the end, talking about how it's broken. And the social contract was originated during the age of enlightenment. Um, and its basic definition, I got this from Google. This is not my definition. But it is described as an implicit agreement among members of a society to cooperate for social benefits. An example of this would be sacrificing some individual freedom for state protection. We do that all the time when you think about just overall how our society is ran. You know, privacy is considered a privilege to a degree. I also want to add that the civil rights movement of the 1960s was the Black communities, the Black American communities' attempt to gain, or I'll say, get them to, and them just being those in power to extend that social contract to us as a community. Um, and I think that's important because everybody talks about the civil rights movement um, in a very niche way. And I wanted to acknowledge that it was so much more than what I think it can be portrayed as today. And so much more came of it than was necessarily intended. And I don't think it was intended to be exclusive to any one group, but I do think that the fervent passion and conviction that came behind the movement was because of situations like Tulsa and because of situations like Rosewood and because of all the situations that happen. And I'll talk more about it a little later in the episode during things like the Red Summer and just dark parts of Black people's history in this country that often get overlooked when talking about the civil rights movement and why it was so profound for Black people in particular, although it did end up benefiting more than just our racial community for sure. I definitely encourage you to do your own research on where the term the Red Summer was coined and why it was considered that. It was the short version because a lot of massacres of Black people in Black areas happened consecutively, all within a very short amount of time, all sporadically throughout the country with no real cohesive purpose outside of terrorizing and dismantling successful Black people. So there's a lot of reasons why you, or if you're not unfamiliar, why a lot of people to your left or to your right may be unfamiliar with the Red Summer. Is because there's a systemic reason why there has been a denial of access to information about not only Black history but Black wealth. And the reason why they're so interconnected is because, again, like we talked about, this country was, I mean, excuse me, Black people were brought to this country purely because they wanted economic success and they wanted to be able to make a big profit on a booming industry and have been trying to stronghold that power and have successfully been doing so since the roots of this country, and systemically keep their wealth and power exclusive because r- if they had to truly give reparations for the things that have taken place in this country towards Black people, like we talked about earlier with the quote from the author, that will require them to eat, not only eat their words, eat the words of bootstraps and all, um, but also sacrifice for the social contract that they want us to respect and dignify, but they can't do the same. Moving on. um, Again, I encourage you to look into Tulsa and Rosewood for sure, for sure. Super important moments and very telling moments about the history of this country. Okay, and one of her chapters, she briefly discussed how she did a mentorship with a lot of young girls, um, and they played Monopoly um, as a means of analogy for, the discussion of wealth and how to build wealth. And long story short, one of the girls missed a round accidentally. It wasn't intentional. She just missed a round. And she asked her if she could go again, go twice since she missed a round. And the observation that the author made was that the girl was never able to catch up. Even with the double round she received, she was still never truly able to catch up to the rest of those players playing. And it was so insightful to what happens when you talk about building wealth in this country, considering how accurate monopoly is to the outlook of wealth in this country specifically. And quote it, I wrote a note of a question she asked. She said, how could we ever catch up when so much of our labor and earning potential has persistently been suppressed and they've been building generational wealth for decades? And that's just to prove the point of the field is not the same. It's just not. And history and facts prove that every day. Lastly, I just want to close out by talking about a quote where she discusses a generational debt, is what she calls it. And she says this: we have to name the truth in that where generational wealth was created, there's a generational debt owed to the enslaved and servants. And after slavery, the people who were disenfranchised from access to wealth building. In this country, wealth is not about, and this is uh, coming from the text as well, wealth is not about how much cash or money you can acquire and save in one lifetime. Wealth is, by definition, the money that endures and grows across generations. It's what allows family and or an institute itself, and consider that when you think about, again, capitalism and things that are set in stone in this country, but it allows family and institutions to make long-term investments. Think about big pharma, think about the tech industry. Someone had to say it. Look, Louis Vuitton himself is what wealth is, not the bag. Not the bag. Let me move on. Let me move on. Or the girls jump down my throat. I want to talk about this statistic, close it out, because I think people, I've been talking a lot. She talked a lot about history, and I don't want it to be the takeaway to be that this isn't related to the present, because it very much is. And that is that in 2021, this is straight out the book, 2021, white people held 90% of the wealth in the United States of America. And for context, they are not 90% of the population, contrary to some belief, probably. They are not 90% of the population, excuse me. They're actually roughly a little less than 60% of the population, which is still the majority, but not by much, if we're being real. Um, and I just want to add that context because in the United States, like we talked about wealth and what that is, the way to acquire wealth in this state most easily and endurably would be through land ownership or home ownership. And to get some historical context to why I'm bringing this up is because in 1925 to 1965, $200 billion of lending for home ownership was given out to the U.S. population, and 98% of that money, 98% from 1925 to 1965, that is 40 years, 98% of that 200 billion was given to white people. In that time period, that those 40 years was when the middle class was developed. So I just want to give you some context of what that could look like today. A house during that time was what, $9,000? A house could be $9,000. That same house today is worth probably close to 200 to $300,000. So a house went from $9,000 to $300,000. So when you connect that to the monopoly analogy that we've been repeating, or she's been repeating, wealth is almost equal to home ownership and equity. So when they talk about things like pull up yourself through your own bootstraps, it's kind of a bunch of bull because the black community specifically and other communities as well, not to try to minimize others' experiences, but in the black community, because it's Black History Month, thank you very much. We were denied those bootstraps. Never was even put on the wanted to be even welcomed on the board to play Monopoly. Like never even wanted y'all here. um, only did it when we could figure out a way that we could still benefit and protect ourselves and protect our power and our wealth. So, and I'll close it out by reading this last section that we'll discuss on this episode. At least maybe we may come back to this book. If you guys like the episode, I can maybe do some more breakdowns of things I enjoyed. But I still definitely suggest reading because this is only pieces, y'all. This is only pieces of the gems that she's dropping in this. Says this is why using the game of Monopoly as an analogy makes so much sense. Wealth is built through home ownership and equity. And if you don't have access to either, you are not even in the game. This is so important because when you hear white people say we should be pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps or that their parents did not finish high school but worked hard and were able to offer them the American dream, they're not acknowledging the truth that the US government gave many of them bootstraps to pull themselves up by, and that Black people have never had. They are the beneficiaries of an immense affirmative action program that's designed to deny us. Yes, they are lying to us, but most of all, they are lying to themselves. I don't talk about white supremacy. I talk about the white supremacist delusions. And this, the idea that white people made something of themselves by sheer force and will and hard work, that is the meat of the delusion. Laugh out loud the next time you hear a white person talk crazy like that. And on that note, I hope y'all had a good Black History Month. I hope y'all do go and read this book. This is really free promo. I didn't get sponsored by this author at all. This was really just me genuinely enjoying this woman's work. I actually look, I am a grown woman and I probably will be reading her YA book. I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. It sounded really good. So definitely won't be my last time reading from this author. So shout out to her. I'm gonna see if I can tag her and maybe Instagram post or something. But if you're listening, Miss Kimberly Jones, you are doing your thing. And to everybody else that's listening, appreciate you for being here. Stay safe, stay well, and stay you. Talk to you next time. I just want to express my gratitude for you taking time out of your day to share this space with me. I hope this episode was meaningful and you leave feeling enriched. I appreciate you for being a part of this community of listeners. I hope you gain some fulfillment out of your day. Please do not forget to go follow us here and on all social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram at the platform LTAI podcast and Twitter at the platform LTAI. Also, share any episodes that you've enjoyed with loved ones. I appreciate any help getting this community to grow. Sending positivity your way, this is your host, Jasmine, signing off. Stay safe, stay well, and farewell.